You know the worst feeling ever? Picking up a deck when it's too late and when price is already too high. The best way to get around that is by trying to get your hands on them just before the hype around them starts getting too overwhelming. And of course it can be difficult to keep up with all the new sets and releases, which is why today I'm doing the job for you. In this video I will be covering 10 decks that will be getting new support from the newest sets that will either make them competitive status or at least rogue status. Anyways, before we go any further, I would like to give a huge shout out to my sponsors Inspire TCG as well as Dueling. They are back with their Ultimate Saints collection, so if you want to get your hands on really awesome Dragon Ball playmats or deck boxes or art cards, you know where to go. Alright, so the first deck to potentially buy now before it's too late would be Marincess. The deck is worth less than nothing right now, and the new Trickstar Marincess card just made the deck really good. It's a level 4 water extender that can either be used as Xyz plays for like Bahamut Shark or Stealth Kraken or Abyss Dweller, or for link plays, and what is really cool about it is that when you link it off, you can look at every card in your opponent's hand and face down. Not to mention that Marincess can play tons of non-engine cards, which means that going second, you're not feeling hopeless. Oh, and also with a Year of Fire finally over, I think we can start seeing more water decks getting actual real support, so I think Marincess is a really good long-term investment. I'd say water decks in general will probably be Konami's main priority this year, which is the reason why the two next decks on this list are water attribute based. So we got the Shark deck that is extremely cheap and not only consistent but also very powerful, and also a great option for new players. And yes, this deck is getting extremely good support in Rage of the Abyss, and it's even been doing well in the OCG. This deck's complexity scales linearly as you grow as a player, which means that it's very rewarding for newer players. It's not like DDD, for example, which is way too difficult if you just started getting into the game, or a deck like Runic Stun, which never really makes you improve too much of the game. As you improve with the Shark deck, you will start understanding how to mitigate the impact of the big hand traps or the big board breakers, which is really important. And you can also improve at deck building by working on your ratios, or minimize the amount of bricks in your deck, or just make the deck overall better going second. It's a deck I genuinely recommend everyone to test just because of how simple and efficient it is, and also it's very easy to get into. The next deck, on the other hand, is insanely complicated, and I do not recommend it to players with very little experience. So just like Shark, Mermail is also getting support in Rage of the Abyss, but the deck is extremely difficult to pilot. There are tons of different lines that you can go into, and beating hand traps isn't super easy or obvious. Not to mention that you have to be extra careful about the management of the water monsters in your graveyard, because if you have, like, let's say too many or not enough waters, then your Moulin Glacia basically does nothing. Mermail is an overall good investment, as the deck is not likely to get hit or suffer collateral damage because it's very archetype locked, meaning that, you know, if something like SP gets banned, you won't really care too much. The deck should be pretty cheap to get right now, but also very expensive to rarity max. Because yes, I know that Mermail players are really fond of their ultimate rares. The deck is very good and definitely near competitive level, but definitely does have some flaws. The biggest issue I personally had when I was testing with Mermail was that I kept losing to the Molchemy monsters. There is pretty much no purpose in hand looping your opponent with Moulin Glacia when you're giving a bunch of draws to your opponent, honestly. That card is a complete nightmare to deal with, and sadly for Mermail, they cannot really adapt to a slower gameplay. They are simply unable to make good half boards because they are locked underwater monsters only, which means no IP into SP for them. And either way, their strategy revolves around summoning a bunch of monsters. It's pretty much like a full monster deck. As a matter of fact, this is that one deck where if it could play Sekka's Light, it might actually consider it. But yeah, whether they summon from the hand deck or extra deck, they kind of just play into all the Molchemy monsters because they need multiple steps in order to achieve their goal. I think they will have their time to shine eventually, so just stay on the lookout for this deck. Alright, so now we've got the exact opposite of Mermail, and I think it's actually quite shocking that we've never gotten the new support for the deck yet, and I'm talking about pure Fire King. No, yeah, this is not your typical Snake Eye Fire King deck list. No. I'm talking about the pure Fire King deck with Fire King Consort Volcanics. The deck can play like 18 or even 20 non-engine in a 40 card deck. It's extremely fun to play and overall really good. Also, unlike Mermail, this deck doesn't really suffer from the Molchemy issue at all because it can easily adapt its playstyle to play on the opponent's turn instead. If you get quote-unquote max seed, then all you have to do is just summon your Kirin on your opponent's turn, which will trigger a bunch of effects like the Runics, and then you can start triggering more effects and just do a lot of things. I tested the deck for dozens of hours, and this deck didn't disappoint me for going second because the Fire King monsters are just so sticky and valuable. This deck does have a slight consistency issue because of the lack of Snake Eye monsters, obviously, which made the deck just pop off with one single card. But again, the fact that every single Snake Eye card could get banned and this deck would still be really good just speaks volume on how legitimate of a strategy the pure Fire King deck is. So yeah, if you're more of a fire player than a water player, then don't worry, you can still turn up the heat with the Fire King deck, and this deck is dirt cheap to play. Now, the fifth deck is a deck that currently exists, but it's extremely bad, and honestly, it's always been bad since it existed. And I am talking about Phantasm Spiral Primoredial. So the Primordial cards are the newer cards from Rage of the Abyss, and they're extremely scary because they allow you to access pretty much all of your normal monsters, which is pretty much only one monster, but you can also search a card that can negate and banish cards on the field, and you have so many consistency cards now, and you can play pretty much every floodgate in the game, and overall this deck is worth absolutely less than nothing, so if you want to get your hands on the deck, then it's very easy to do so, and you do not need an extra deck either because all you really do is just summoning Beast 6. I think the deck will be around Rogue status because it'll be able to catch people off guard and even steal some YCS tops every now and then. As I've said, the deck is currently complete garbage, but the Primordial cards from Rage of the Abyss will definitely carry the deck to victory. Alright, so we're basically halfway done with this video, which is the perfect opportunity for me to, ask you guys to smash the like and subscribe button. Thank you so much, you're the GOAT. Anyways, the sixth deck I will be covering is none other than Galaxy Photon, which of course is a fan favorite, and a powerhouse as well. The deck just feels incredibly good to play just because of how many good options there are. You can even play Shifter if you really want to, but then you're turning it less into a Galaxy Photon deck and rather more into like a rank 8 turbo OTK deck. And the deck can also beat Nibiru, which again feels very good, and you can just overall beat a bunch of handshaps and people will probably interact very poorly against you because nobody knows how the deck works. The one issue with this deck is that it cannot play a lot of non-engine cards because you do have to dedicate like 28 cards to your engine since the engine is very, very huge, otherwise you will start breaking. Nonetheless, the deck is super close to tier 1 status with the new support and could very well be tier 1 with a good ban list. Because obviously this deck does not stand a chance against the current full power Snake Eyes and Yubel, but obviously if we ban those decks then, maybe. And the deck is also super cheap, so it should be realistic to deck build this deck from scratch. Not to mention that you don't really need generic staples that are worth like $100 to build this deck, so you should be fine. I've made a bunch of combo videos and deck profiles on this deck already, but I'm not done making them yet. I will be probably making a spreadsheet video in a couple of days or weeks. So yeah, stay tuned and make sure you get your hands on this deck before it's too late. Anyways, number 7 is Battle Wasp, and I don't have that much to say about it, but I still have a few observations. So this deck is typically played in tandem with like generic insect monsters like Retelling Sea or Resonance Insect or the Beat Trooper engine or even the new Ragna Raika cards. So it almost feels like a good stuff insect deck, which I feel like that's what insect decks have been for like the longest time anyways. The deck has a new 1-card combo that is super explosive, and even though I don't really understand anything about Battle Wasp, it really feels like Blackwing 2.0. I have played against Battle Wasp not too long ago, and I felt like if it wasn't for my Molchemy monsters, I completely would have lost that match. The reason for that is because they can turbo out Scary Moth with a bunch of counter traps, and the Scary Moth is basically El Shaddai Winda, so if you can't out that, then you basically just lose. But the main flaw with insect decks is that they absolutely cannot play a lot of non-engine cards, which means that going second, it's kind of a struggle. Also, going second might be a little weird because of it, but at the same time, people will, again, most likely interact incorrectly with you, which means that you can prey on people's ignorance, which is good. Alright, number 8 goes to 6 Samurai, which is a deck that has fantastic potential, but then again, it does depend on how good of a ban list we get very soon. This time though, you could make a gamble and invest on the 6 Samurai deck, because if Gateway of the 6 gets unlimited, you will be getting heavily rewarded. But if this doesn't happen and Gateway of the 6 stays at 1, then 6 Samurai is going absolutely nowhere. This deck is a little mid in terms of consistency and resilience, but in terms of power level, it's very high. So the issue is going second, you're gonna struggle, and going first, if you get a hand trapped multiple times, it'll be a little difficult, but if you do not get a hand trapped, and if you obviously do not get hit by a board breaker like Dark Ruler, your end boards are pretty much always insane with pretty much every hand. However, with 3 Gateway of the 6, we don't really necessarily fix all the issues, but we still make the deck so much better that I still think it's really worth looking into. Also, the deck is very fun to play and a fan favorite, so, that's already bonus points for the deck. Okay, so number 9 is a deck that can make disgusting boards, but it's also super difficult to play, and that deck would be A, B, and C. Except that now it's pretty much ABC, XYZ because the new XYZ cards are absolutely cracked. The new support turns the deck into a full-fledged combo deck that can use the Fiendsmith engine better than everyone. Not to make Caesar or anything boring like that, but rather to make Beatrice to send your missing letters. And also discard the surplus letters with Fiendsmith Tract. As a matter of fact, whether you have X-Cross Cannon or Yunin Hanger as your 1-card combo, you can play around Nibiru regardless of when your opponent nibs you. And it's not even because you make an Appaloosa or something boring like that, it's just because you can recover after getting hit by a nib. Yes, this deck is extremely resilient and can also navigate through all the Molchemy cards and even Shifter and Droll. With that being said, this deck will give you a headache after a few rounds of playing it because of how difficult it is to play. But that also means that it's super fun, consistent, powerful, and rewarding. Now, there will be a little bit of collateral damage if the Fiendsmith engine gets hit, because obviously it utilizes it for Beatrice and everything, but it's not the end of the world. If Baby Goddess gets banned, this deck is still pretty much just as good as before, because you can still go into the Link 1 using Evil Swarm Excite on Knight. Again, this deck is a rank 4 turbo deck, so it's pretty much the exact same combo as before. So yeah, when there is a will, there is a way. Anyways, last but definitely not least is a deck that I personally think can be tier 1, and I've tested it for so many hours, so I am pretty confident in the statement, and I am talking about Goblin Biker. I do plan on showcasing it in action very soon, so stay tuned again for a combo video and a spreadsheet video eventually. But yeah, the deck is very consistent, powerful, and resilient if built well, and can also play Shifter if you know what you're doing. With that said, this deck gets completely annihilated by the older Molchemi monster, which is Molchemi Parolia. All of your extenders pretty much summon themselves from the hand, which really hurts a lot. Nonetheless, this deck has insane potential and can take serious advantage of the Fiendsmith engine as well. And of course, this deck is worth absolutely less than nothing right now. If you like the deck's design and you plan on playing it in the future, you only have like a few weeks left before it's too late. And if all you need is my approval to go for it, then you have it right now. Go ahead and treat yourself with Goblin Biker, it's really worth it. Anyways, that's all I had for this video, guys. Thank you so much for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe. And let me know if you think that there's other decks that we should start looking into right now. Peace.